Good morning, Max. It's Mr. Ramey. It's Friday. I've been working inside throughout the day on my computer, and right now it looks like that outside say they can keep us from school, but they can't keep us from being creative. Now would be a good time to go on a walk and practice a little creative thinking. I'm gonna put on my jacket because it's a little bit chilly. One moment.
Cloudier than like the Pacific Northwest. You guys get more rainfall. We get more clouds.
Mrs. Ramey is about to start yoga. And why don't we go on a walk? If you've never gone on a job walk before, we're going to look at all the things that have been made by people. It turns out it's everywhere around us, and you might not have noticed it. All you need is a piece of paper and pencil. Make the biggest list possible of all the jobs you can see out there because of what you see out there. So if you see a car, somebody had to make the car. Try to figure out all the jobs that are involved in making that thing. So in a car, think about all the pieces. It wasn't one person or one job. There were many jobs. The people who manufacture the glass are different from the people who manufacture the tires. And I should probably say now that we can't just say maker after what we see and always have the right name, like concrete maker or road maker. But in this case, we would not want to put an ER at the end of the word and call the person who made this a piper, because a piper is somebody who plays a pipe or flutes. But it would still be useful because we're describing what we're seeing, and we're seeing more and more. Your challenge is to notice everything and to make the longest possible list of jobs that must exist in the world because of all the things that exist in the world. Somebody made those signs. Somebody painted these signs. Somebody had to carve out the letters in the signs. There are hedge trimmers and UPS delivery drivers. There are people who repair roads. There are fence makers. And the people who keep our telephone lines going and our electric running. And because all these wires are strung up so high, sometimes the trees get in the way and we have to have tree trimmers to make sure that nothing touches the wires. How many jobs are just in the telephone wires and telephone poles? There are railing makers and railing painters. There are flag makers. There are TV installation people and solar panel makers, fire hydrant makers, and then the fire hydrant users, firemen, the garbage men and women. Somebody's job was to drill these holes. And even if somebody didn't drill these holes by hand, somebody had to make the machine, and somebody had to design the machine. People in charge of water, people in charge of gas. Somebody designed the sewer lids and the whole sewer system beneath. Some engineer realized that to make this heavy entry door to this park easier to move, it could be put on wheels. And then I started seeing it on other heavy things, like these bleachers. Somebody designed this to keep the rain off the footpath. Somebody made this bright blue deck hockey rink. And I would guess that whoever synthesized that bright blue color, who made the dye that makes that material blue, that is not the same person or people who put this rink together. Are people who make bleachers and the little ridges on the bleachers so you don't slip. More fence makers, more UPS drivers, and one of my personal favorites. I've always dreamed about designing a playground. Are the people who make the floors of playgrounds the same as the people who build the playgrounds? This was, I didn't know what this was for a little bit. I started to see this drip, this black goopy drip everywhere. And then I saw this and I realized it's on the asphalt where it's black, but it's not, there's none of it over here on this type of road. And then I realized that it was tar or like some sort of sealer that somebody's dripping in the cracks on the roads so to keep the roads from falling apart too much. And some of it is kind of sloppy. But some of it is not. And whoever's doing it is like precise. I started to notice it everywhere, and I never noticed it before. And walking around looking at the world this way for the jobs out there, I just started to want to look at everything. There's so much going on outside. It's early spring, April 3rd. And yet there are some trees who've already fully bloomed and are wilted on the ground. It made me want to look at everything. There's nothing really boring about the world. Sometimes we just don't want to get out there and look at things. If you have this experience, sometimes you don't want to get out of bed. Sometimes I don't want to get out of bed, and even if I'm excited about my day and what I have planned for the morning, it's the getting up part that's no fun. But once I'm up, I'm good to go, and the rest of it takes care of itself. Garbage can makers. I particularly like that one. I think that's an air conditioner on a roof. It's an odd place for it. But there are roof makers and ventilation cap makers and light makers and brick makers and block makers and sign painters again and artists and postal men and women and the people who made the post box. And that's a camera. Somebody made that. Surveillance camera makers. Dumpster makers. The people who take dumpsters away. The people who make sure we're not littering and dumping all over the place. Lawn art makers. The person who designed that beautiful design, that's not the same job as the person who made the railing. Siding fixers. Nobody makes the tulips and daffodils. The people in charge of plumbing. Lawn art. I don't know what this is. Somebody made it though. And there's a water spout at the bottom. I started to notice things that I would never have noticed. Somebody's in charge of boarding up houses that are no longer fit to be lived in. Somebody's job is to fix walls. Look at all these houses. And how many jobs go into making just one house? That's a good project for some student out there. You'd learn so much if you tried to honestly and accurately answer that question. I really like this car. Somebody designed that car. Somebody thought if we're going to make a wall, we have to allow all the water that's building up above to drain through it. Wind chime makers, birdhouse makers, archway makers. There's a lot more to see than you might realize unless you go outside and look around.